So we want to start filtering by genre, and before we go too much further, you might have noticed that at some points I'm calling the various types of movies, mystery, comedy, so on and so forth, categories, and in other cases I'm calling them genres, and that's going to lead to confusion down the road, and now is the time to pick a name. So I'm going to call it genre, which means I need to do some refactoring. So in my app.js, for example, I'm importing right here components categories. And what am I doing with that? Let's find out. Right here, I'm using it here, and that's matching us. So what I'm going to do is just start refactoring things. To start with, I'm actually not going to use this categories.js at any point. So I'm going to delete that right now because we're just going to replace it with something better. So let's delete that. And that will cause us to have some JavaScript errors and some compile errors, but we'll take care of those in a few minutes. So back in app.js, right away, let's find the things that we're calling. For example, we can get rid of this. We're not using it anymore. But let's find the things where we're calling things category. I'm going to call this genres. And down a little bit further, do we have any other calls? Yes, we have calls to categories, so I'm just going to delete that entirely because we're not going to use that. And here, by category becomes genres. And that will link us to something called genres. So let's create a new component, a new file, which I will call genres.js. And I'll do imrc. And I'll define a class, export default class genres, extends component, and I'll just give it a render function right now, just so it'll compile. And we'll say return h2 genres, like that. Okay, so that gives me something to import that I can use back in my app.js. So let's go up here and import genres from /components genres. And then down here where I have this problem, right here, instead of a category page, we'll go to genres. Okay. And I'm going to get rid of this entirely as well because that's causing me some grief. And then down here, we don't need this function category page anymore because that's actually what we're going to do this time around is build our category page, which will now be called our genre page. All right, so this should be compiling without errors at this point, and it is, so that's good. So let's keep going. Now, what do we want to do this time around? Well, we want to have a page. If we go back to our web browser, this should be compiled. Oh, let's relabel that to genres. I knew I missed something. Genres. All right, so we want to be able to click on this and list our various genres here, and then click on an entry from the list that appears here and show all of the movies that are of that particular genre. That's our goal. So there's some things that have to happen before we can do that, but we can get started. So let's go back to this new page or this new component called genres. And it's obviously going to have a state, and it's also going to have a component did mount. So let's get started with that. Let's give it its state to start with. It'll be very similar to what we had before. So I'll declare or define the variable state to be equal to, it'll have genres, which will initially be an empty array. It will also have an isLoaded, which will initially be false, and will also have an error, which will initially be null. Okay. Then we're going to need a component did mount, and I can just grab that from movies to start with. So I'll copy this and change it as necessary. And again, we're going to be defining a route that we go to on our backend that doesn't exist yet, but we'll fix that before too long. So let's just paste in our component did mount, and we'll change this movies to genres, a route that doesn't exist in our backend, but we'll get to that probably in the next lecture. Okay, so we're going to grab some information from this. Obviously, we're probably going to have a wrapper called genres. So we can change that. This should stay the same. This should stay the same. Perfect. So let's go down to our render function and see what we're going to have here. Obviously, we're going to grab a few things from from the state, and we'll extract them into local variables. Const, and we'll say genres and is loaded and error all come from state, this dot state. And again, we'll have, well, we could just return something here for right now and fix it up later on. So we could say return, and I'll wrap it in a fragment. And above this, we'll put the title, H2 genres. And below that, we'll have an unordered list. And then we'll just go over our genres. Genres.map. And we'll pass it M. And inside of that, we'll have an li with a key equal to m.id, which we'll be grabbing from the JSON. And then we'll have a link. Link to equals, and we're going to build our URL. And it will be a URL or that we're not handling right now, but we'll add that later on. /genre, and then $, m.id. And then we close the opening link tag and put in m.genre.name. m.genre_name, I think it is. Yeah, it is. And our link is closed. Now, we need to import link so we can actually use that. Import link from React Router DOM. And that should fix the error down here. And it does. Okay. So we're going to have to put in our logic to check for loading and check for error and all of that in the render function, but this is enough to get us started. So when I load this, we should have no errors. And when I go back to my web browser, I should be able to click on that once I route to it. Did I route to it in the app.js? I think I did. Yep, I'm linking to genres here, and here I'm going to genres. So everything compiled, so I should be able to go back to my web browser and not see anything in the genres page, but it shouldn't give me an error. And that's good. All right. So now, next we need to go modify our backend to actually give us the genres as we want them. And we'll take care of that in the next lecture.